gone to a place that you thought you knew pretty well, only to realize that things are not the way you expected them to be? Like maybe you visited a town you used to live in or a place you once vacationed, but decades ago. You know, it can be disorienting to revisit familiar territory and feel lost. I had that feeling recently when I saw an online listing for a house I once lived in and loved. It was our first house. It'll always be dear to me. In that little house of dreams, we spent the first decade of our marriage planting our first gardens, hosting dinner parties for dear friends, even welcoming our baby. And there it was on Zillow, my house, only so very different. Someone had painted it entirely the wrong color and changed everything. All the lovely things we had done to our dreamy little cottage, someone with different taste had redone. I would not have known that house had it not been listed under my own address. Even without physically stepping inside, I was uncomfortable. Things were not as I had expected them to be. In a sense, reading a parable, the kind of story Jesus used to teach his lessons, it's like stepping into a house that should seem familiar, only it does not. Jesus always taught using parables, stories about things that his listeners understood very well. But in Jesus' parables, things often seem out of place. Things are not where or how we would expect. It's like he's moved everything around, mixed up the furniture, made it so you just can't quite get comfortable. And that's intentional. There is no lying down on the couch and taking a nap when you have stepped into one of Jesus' parables. Instead, we are meant to pay attention and notice where we feel uncomfortable, because that is exactly where we start to learn. So today I'm going to invite you to step into one of Jesus' parables with me, and as we walk around that room, let's just notice things. If you've heard this parable before, pay extra close attention because this room may yet have some surprises for you. Now, the front steps leading up to this parable are when Peter asked Jesus what kind of a reward he and the other apostles would get since they had been right alongside Jesus the whole time. You know, they'd given up so much to follow him, and it only seemed right that they should be richly rewarded. And Jesus acknowledged that everything would be made right for them. But then he said something odd, that many who are first will be last, and the last will be first. That's strange, probably surprising to Peter and the others who were literally the first ones to follow Jesus. As they stood there scratching their heads, Jesus invited them to step into a parable with him, saying, this is the 20th chapter of Matthew, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. After agreeing with the laborers for the usual daily wage, he sent them into his vineyard. When he went out about 9 o'clock, he saw others standing idle in the marketplace, and he said to them, 'You also go into the vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right.' So they went. When he went out again about noon and about 3 o'clock, he did the same. And about 5 o'clock, he went out and found others standing around, and he said to them, 'Why are you standing here idle all day?' They said to him, 'Because no one has hired us.' He said to them, 'You also go into the vineyard.' When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his manager, 'Call the laborers and give them their pay, beginning with the last and then going to the first.' When those hired about 5 o'clock came, each of them received the usual daily wage, a denarius. Now when the first came, they thought they would receive more, but each of them also received 1 denarius. And when they received it, they grumbled against the landowner, saying, 'These last worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat.' But he replied to one of them, 'Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for the usual daily wage, a denarius? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give to this last the same as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or are you envious because I am generous?' So the last will be first, and the first will be last." And so we leave the way we came in, stepping down those steps that look pretty rickety. The last will be first, and the first will be last. I'm not sure I trust those steps. That sounds like bad engineering to me. As any carpenter knows, there is a definite order for what goes first and last if you want something to hold weight. You can't do it all backwards, but That's how this house is built. Did you notice? The workers who showed up last get paid first. That's weird, right? Obviously, the most tired workers should get paid first and sent home to their well-deserved rest. That was poorly organized from a managerial point of view. But that wasn't the part that bothered us the most, was it? Sure, it's annoying that the early shift workers had to wait for their pay. But the most horrible part is that they had to watch while all the latecomers got paid exactly the same amount that they would take home for a full day of work. No way is that fair from an economic perspective. If that ever happened to us as workers, we would be on strike before you could say unfair labor practices. Although, as the vineyard owner pointed out, it wasn't exactly unfair because it was all in their contract. They only ever expected to earn a single denarius, so they really had little room to argue about not getting more than they were offered. That is none of their business, really, if the vineyard owner decides to offer a generous bonus to the ones who came later. But it bothers us, doesn't it? I mean, on principle, we pretty much subscribe to the philosophy that people should get what they deserve. If you want more, you work more, right? Things are earned. Fair's fair. But this parable disrupts every usual notion about what is fair, as Jesus lays out the blueprint for what he calls the kingdom of heaven, which, remember, is another way of saying the kingdom of God. And it is not some dreamy place up in the clouds. It's a way of life Jesus is teaching his followers to live here on earth. And he wants them to understand how this new way of life is going to look pretty different from how things usually look in the only kingdom they've ever known. In their experience, as in ours, workers get paid by the hour. You work a shorter day, you get a smaller pay. But in this alternative community Jesus is envisioning, everyone who participates will be treated the same, no special privileges. The bottom line is this: they will all get what they need, no more and no less. You see, the particular coin that he names as the rate of pay, the denarius, this was the amount used to pay a day laborer for a day's work. It represented subsistence. It's not big money. It is just enough to feed a family for a couple days. You work all day and earn 1 denarius, you will eat, but you won't get rich. By contrast, if you earned less than 1 denarius, you could not buy enough bread to feed your family, probably for a day. Remember Jesus' prayer? Give us this day our daily bread. Not give me this day my daily bread, but give us, all of us, our daily bread. It is a prayer that all should have enough. And that's his vision expressed through this parable. In the kingdom of God, this community he's training his disciples to build, all of us will have our daily bread. Even if you arrive late to the work party? Apparently so. And there will be grumbling. These didn't put in a full day's work, so what? They don't get to eat? This was literally the plight of a day laborer in this time and place. No work for the day, no food for the family. And it wasn't because they were irresponsible with money or even lazy. In Roman-occupied Palestine, many of Jesus' own people were living on the edge, having lost their land due to economic policies that favored rich landowners from Rome. Without land to work, the landless farmers had limited options. They weren't skilled artisans, not having tools or training to make things. All they knew how to do was plant and harvest. So they hired themselves out to work other people's land for subsistence wages, which would have at least kept body and soul together, only there were many of them. You don't have to be an economist to understand that surplus labor means unemployment or underemployment. And that is what we can see if we pay attention to the details of this parable. Each time the landowner goes out to hire workers, notice there are more workers looking for jobs. This suggests oversupply and unemployment. Maybe they tried earlier in another place but found no work. And by the time they got there, the day was nearly over, but something would be better than nothing. But instead of sending anyone home to a hungry family with only a few bucks and wishes for better luck next time, the landowner sends them away with enough. Not an extravagant sum, mind you, just the usual minimum wage for a day's work, but it will feed the family their daily bread. And that, according to Jesus, is what the kingdom of heaven should be like. a community of care here on earth in which everyone is treated with respect and dignity, valued enough to participate on whatever level they are able, and ensured their portion of the daily bread. Now, we may recall that the early church was heavily invested in communal eating. Church was potluck. People shared food together in order to ensure that everyone in the community got enough to eat. Maybe there would have been grumbling about it, as the numbers grew and more people were showing up. Some of them perhaps less likely to bring a dish to pass, right? But the people in Matthew's faith community had this parable to show them a different way. It's a total makeover of the old structure in which they had always lived and participated, in which the rich had the status and the poor were lucky to get scraps. But no, says Jesus, the first shall be last and the last shall be first. And at the end of the day, everyone will get their share of the daily bread. Not their fair share that they earned by years of loyalty and service, but their enough share that they deserve simply by being members of the beloved community, which does not allow anyone to go home hungry. This is the generosity to which we are called as participants in this little experiment Jesus called the kingdom of heaven. We are called to be like that generous landowner who went out several times in a day just to make sure everyone had a chance. That is what it means to live in accordance with God's will, which has always been just this, that everyone has access to what they need. What do people need? Well, according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, food is right there at the basic level. You cannot live on an empty belly, so that is where we start. Right? We contribute to the food pantry, we deliver the Meals on Wheels, we provide snacks for the after-school kids, right? Serve our monthly community supper to all who show up, even if they have never put a dime in the plate and maybe never could. In fact, these are the ones we serve first to make sure they get enough, because that is how Jesus arranged the furniture in this room. Kind of backwards, but we can understand his reasoning. But people have other needs too, don't they? They need community, they need connection, they need purpose. They need to know they belong to something bigger than themselves. And that too is how we can live into our calling to be the kingdom of heaven here on earth. We connect with those who hunger for belonging, making sure that no one feels like a stranger. It is nothing less than our sacred responsibility to welcome those who may feel like they're late to the party, and to make sure they leave feeling fed, connected, and cared for. This, my friends, is how we live into our vision of following Jesus, thriving in community, and continuing God's ongoing process of healing the world. Whatever part of it we find ourselves in, this is our work to do. May God bless you as you discern how best to show that kind of kingdom to the people in your midst. May it be well with your soul.